found the basket, here it is. So I'll go ahead and start it now. There you go. Well, I'm standing in for Michael, is it Roach?
Yeah,
Roach. Mike Roach.
Roach.
And I had a little question about that, and I didn't want to say it wrong without whether it was Roach or something. Anyway, he's out of town today, so I'm standing in. I'm Toby Savage, and I joined the club almost a year ago, and well, actually it was more than a year ago, and I'm a retired architect, and I got interested in East Chapel Hill Rotary because of the Green Team and the work the Green Team does for Habitat when I was volunteer at the Restore. And so I'm thankful for running into East Chapel Hill Rotary Club. I always heard a lot about it from Bill Blackman, my brother-in-law. Now, say a brief blessing over our meal that we have well into, but we'll go ahead with that. We are thankful for an international service ethic of Rotary that emphasizes truth, fairness, goodwill, friendship, and benefits to all people. Thank you for this meal. Amen. Anybody who has guests or who is a visiting Rotarian, please first introduce your guests. Okay.
I'm Julie Kenny. My guest is Claire Williams. Claire is an environmental scientist at American University. She lives in Chapel Hill. She went to Chapel Hill High School, the real high school, right? And she's an avid bicyclist. This is her first time with Rotary. She expressed interest in the work that Family House does. So welcome to it.
Other guests?
I've got two guests, Mark Eagles and Miles Parker from Sea Roads Insurance Agency. Nobody ever asked them.
Dan Haller, I have a guest. This is my mom, Helen Haller. She's here from California, and she's a retired school teacher.
Others? Any visiting Rotarians? Okay. I'm going to give the Green Team another plug as member news. I don't see Liz Hinkie here. Oh, there she is, behind the counter. Liz has gotten the Green Team some notoriety, and Habitat is very appreciative of what the Rotary Club has done to help them get solar panels on a number of houses on a street in Hillsborough. It's called Odie Street, and ride down it, and sometime if you're in that area of Hillsborough, you can look it up. And you would really enjoy seeing this whole row of the street there with planting and so on. I'm gonna try these jokes on you, and we'll see what happens. Well, that would work. Okay, that worked. Some of this is kind of fictitious, and some of it is anecdotal. I flew down to Alabama 2 weeks ago, and travel has really changed since the pandemic. The plane had gotten in the air when an announcement came on. This is the captain speaking. I'm working from home. Now, that was made up. The others, a couple of them are told by a pilot, who we joined at a kind of a community table at a place called Cape Paul's Restaurant in New Orleans. Some of you may have eaten there. And he told us some funny stories. He was a pilot, and there were some stewardesses. Well, there's one pilot loved to wrap a big scarf around his neck. Now, he's telling. He actually did this, I think. He wrapped a scarf around his neck like Peanuts, Snoopy. In Peanuts, Snoopy was the one that had the, he would greet the passengers when they boarded the plane off the bridge, and he'd shake the hands of them to them, and he'd say, welcome aboard. I am Captain Jock Strap. Okay, I'll try one more time. You'll only get one more of these. When he got bored on a long flight, he would make this announcement. Everyone who hasn't done so yet, please do so now. That takes a little while to say that. But if that came out on your plane, that would be you would laugh. Well, what you call it on? It takes a while. The collection plates going around. Okay, we'll just keep it coming. And I'll turn it over now to, excuse me,
Thank you, Toby. Appreciate it. Someone texted me, they will go unnamed. Someone texted me and said, are you going to give him the hook? And I said, no way. I said, our speaker's not here yet. But he did a good job. He was going somewhere, and I thought your jokes were great. So thank you, Toby. Big round of applause. No, I'm not going to tell who the name is, but it rhymes with Grieve Grammy. But I'm not going to say who their name is. It rhymes with Grieve Grammy. Reminder, okay, so my friend Michelle, who I grew up with, she's about to walk in the building. She's our speaker today, and I'll give her intro when she walks in. But we started a little late, so sorry for the delay. I I did want to see if anyone had any announcements that they'd like to make. Greet Romney, yes.
Actually, before my announcement, I have an airplane story.
This is dangerous, all right.
No, this is true, supposedly. Southwest flights stopped, and during the layover, people deplaned who were traveling on. One older couple remained on the plane. The pilot was about to get off and go stretch his legs, use the facilities. He sees the older couple there, and they have a dog with them. It was a blind couple, and they had the dog with them. He said, "Don't you want to get off the plane?" I said, "No, we'll just stay here." He said, "Well, would you like for me to take your dog for a walk?" I said, "That would be great." So he leaves with the dog, comes back, and it's getting back on the plane right about the time the next flight is starting to board. So passengers see the pilot coming on with it. And, make you wonder there. But on a more serious note, Mike Clayton's father is on his deathbed, probably sounds like that. He's in the hospital right now. They hope to be able to get him home Sunday and bring in hospice, but it's not looking good. So please keep him in your thoughts.
Thank you, Steve.
I've got a quick one.
All right, now we're done. Please take a seat. Yeah. Listen.
Oh, well, let me get started.
Our speaker just showed up. Otherwise, I would give it to you. I do like the outfit, though. Real quick, a reminder. Next week, we have the cookout at Mark Hunt's. If you haven't signed up yet, please do so. We have about 75 people coming so far. Tim Smith is going to send around the actual written paper. You can also sign up online. You can bring guests. It should be a great time. Mark Hunt's place is a farm right off of Mount Carmel Church Road, where Mount Carmel meets Parker Road. Like you're going to Rhododendron Drive over there, the reserve. So it should be a great time. We are still looking at an end-of-year field trip, an overnight in early June. So if anyone's interested, it's going to be a real quick trip, probably down to the coast. If we don't have a whole lot of people signed up, we might just go up to Smith Mountain Lake. I've got a place up at Smith Mountain Lake, and so that's also a possibility. So keep that in mind. That's going to be early June.
Hey, Omar.
Yes, Bill.
Give the directions one more time. I might have a much simpler way to explain. Did you say we're off the road or didn't? Yeah. So the Mark Road.
No, Parker Road, off of Mount Carmel and Parker Road.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like you're going to the reserve, kind of the back way.
It's just once you go past Parker's the first step.
Yeah, but you're actually going to turn left on Parker to get to his parking lot. It's right across from Sparrow Cemetery there. That's the entrance, and most people are going to take. Now, some special people with special needs, like yourself, are going to turn in off of Mount Carmel Road and park a lot closer to the venue, because it's a very short walk from that point on. If you have any mobility needs or special needs, so without further ado, I would like to introduce my dear friend Michelle Cotton Laws. Michelle and I grew up together. I've known Michelle since elementary school. And, Michelle has always been, kind of the life of the party. We used to ride bus 55 together down Rogers Road. And I've always been extremely impressed with the path that Michelle has always taken. Michelle has always been the person to stand up, to speak out for others. She's been a huge figure as far as rights and justice goes. She has been the head of the North Carolina NAACP. And I'm not exactly sure what she's going to talk about today, but I'm sure whatever it is should be very interesting to listen to. So without further ado, please give a big East Chapel Hill Rotary round of applause and welcome to my friend Michelle Conlon.
Thank you. Thanks, East Chapel Hill Rotary, and to I call him my brother from another mother, Omar, for the invitation. It is really good to be here because I am a native, born and raised. I was born at Memorial Hospital, and I love this place. It's not that I haven't traveled. I've actually traveled the world, been places on the continent of Africa and throughout Europe, Western Europe, haven't gotten to Eastern Europe yet, but Western Europe, and have seen many, many beautiful places. But I'm biased. I don't think there's a place better in the world than right here in Chapel Hill. So it's always good to be here. And thank you for your indulgence of my time. I made the mistake of thinking I could just run to my office to pick up something and run back. My office is behind the governor's mansion, just to give you an idea. I do appreciate the invitation. I have a PowerPoint that I will give to Omar later. I just taking up too much time to get it hooked up and all of that. What I want to talk about today is something that I have been thinking about a lot lately. What Omar did not tell you is that I grew up in one of our public housing communities for a while. Grew up first across from Lincoln High School, which is where many of the African Americans in Chapel Hill lived on that side of town. And then my grandmother moved us to Pritchard Public Housing, and we were there for a while until she bought her home near my great-grandmother and aunt on Rogers Road. And that's where I grew up, and then left Chapel Hill High School and took the path that many Chapel Hillians take, and that is went right into UNC Chapel Hill. After, actually, a lot of people don't know, taking a year off. And so I give my history because it has gotten me to thinking a lot about how I made it to where I am. So now I live on the other side of Meadowline in a nice zip code area, and have been blessed to be able to not only go to UNC Chapel Hill, but North Carolina Central, and then VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine. And I thought about how in the world does a young girl make it from public housing community to med school, to VCU School of Medicine down the PhD track. How in the world does a young girl from a public housing community make it where she is sitting in one of her positions at a table with Governor Jim Hunt talking about, along with Marshall Morey, talking about what we need to put in place to keep women from entering into prison. Never had any experience with prison, have been arrested though in the Moral Mondays protests, protesting for Medicaid expansion, which hopefully when we pass a budget in North Carolina, that will be a reality. And so lately I've been thinking about how blessed and privileged I am. One, to grow up in Chapel Hill at a time when it really was a magical time. We have one of our high school teachers here who will attest, when we could get into a lot of trouble, but not get in trouble for getting into a lot of trouble. One of my best friends is Kim Brigham, Dr. Al Brigham and Irene Brigham's daughter. And I can tell you we got into a lot of trouble on Lakeshore Drive. And so I've been thinking about this a lot lately, Omar, as we get of a certain age and we start really thinking about what legacy do we want to leave behind. And so today, just briefly, I want to ask that of the Rotary. What legacy now do you want to leave behind beyond being an organization that is committed to service and serving others and making sure that you give back in different ways, right? And I want to talk about it within the context of, and I use the title, Clean the River, shifting from a downstream approach to an upstream approach in responding to the needs of kids from disadvantaged communities. And I want to keep us right here, because a lot of people, when I moved to DC to work, also worked for a congressman, thought I was going to work for David, went up there, and then he, that was the one time he lost, and so I was up there thinking, okay, now what am I going to do up here now? And so ended up working for a congressman representing Maryland's 4th Congressional District. How ironic was that, right? So I began to really, I want to think about how we in Chapel Hill can have this shift from a downstream approach to an upstream approach when it comes to providing services, interventions, and preventions to disadvantaged youth. Young people that many of your kids or grandkids probably went to school with, but you may have never met. Young kids from one of our, I think we have 8 now, public housing communities, which when I was in DC, people would find out I'm from Chapel Hill, and they just assumed everybody from Chapel Hill lived a certain way, was high income, high SES, and so forth. And they were shocked. Everybody that I told I grew up in a public housing community in Chapel Hill, they would say, Chapel Hill, like the Chapel Hill, like North Carolina, and this is what they would always say, like the Chapel Hill, Michael Jordan's Chapel Hill. I'm like, yeah, the same Chapel Hill. Michael Jordan's Chapel Hill. And so lately I've been thinking about this shifting from a downstream approach to an upstream approach. And one of the slides I have is a lot of people in a river, and it's really crowded at the end. It's a crowded river. They've got all kinds of things out on the river. People are in the river. And that's how I envision civic organizations now. There are a lot of people downstream providing prevention to kids once they've gotten downstream. And guess what? That is really, really hard to do, to change the trajectory of a child once they've traveled through unclean or turbulent or, muddy waters. Many children will not make it into programs that are supported by civic organizations, that are supported by, sororities and fraternities and so forth in their commitments to service. Many of the children will not make it into those programs, first of all. Big Brothers and Big Sisters has a waiting list all across the country, for example. Many after-school programs, especially here in this area, are looking for kids, but it gets crowded pretty quickly. Daycare, child care centers, and so forth. A lot of kids will not make it into safety when they're traveling from these downriver, experiencing what many sociologists, many medical professionals, clinicians, and so forth are talking about now, and that's ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. So the other slide you would see is what makes up ACEs. So that's poverty, that's hunger, that's living in communities with violence. So think about right next door, up the street, Durham. Think about the kids who have to live in Durham in the city part where there's gun violence. We hear a story almost every single weekend about somebody getting killed, a young person in Durham. My family has been impacted. Family member that moved from Chapel Hill to Durham, lost her son at a gas station, going into the store, coming out, and there was gunfire. And so I think about kids who will never, ever be able to make it to safety. So we need to shift our focus from, yes, continuing to support downstream, the prevention programs, we need to shift our focus upstream. What does that look like, and where is that? All of us, I think, should be advocates from a policy perspective for children having what they need to survive from birth, even from the womb, all the way to the time in which they make it into this world and they matriculate as kids, as young children. That is so important. We need what kinds of policies? We need to be talking about policies that make sure that the least of those are first. Now, I know that's hard, and that's not a very popular statement to make when we all feel like, our kids deserve to be the first in line too. I want to challenge us to think about the kids who don't have any of us in their lives, who don't have, we're raising a 2-year-old, my goddaughter's child, at this age, a 2-year-old. But we wanted to keep her out of the foster care system. So think about, and that was a big commitment and a sacrifice. So think about kids who we need to shift the spaces sometimes of our kids being first and putting these kids first. Why? Because they have resources. Our kids have resources. I'm not making any assumptions, I hope, that are not true, and if that is, please forgive me for that. But our kids, we've got to think about who really needs to get those services. Who really needs to be on, who needs to be on the wait list for example, Parks and Rec, basketball or swim, right? I was talking to Mr. Nate Davis, and he was a little frustrated before he retired. Mr. Nate Davis ran Hargrave Center, which is where I grew up playing all the time, in the Northside community. He said, we got to do something. Some of these parents, they get in and they get their kids first on the list for swimming, first on the list for the athletic programs. And that's leaving a lot of poor Black kids in Chapel Hill, poor Hispanic and Latino kids in Chapel Hill. And then we've got a large refugee community, Burmese community, and so forth. That's putting them on waiting lists. So I want to challenge us to think about upstream. How do we help kids who are at the bottom, social and economically, who are experiencing adverse childhood experiences? How do we invest in those kids and make sure that some of them get positioned first? My story. I was positioned first. I had people, for whatever reason, teachers, who invested in me, who saw something in this little girl, who pushed me and insisted that I was my very best, and who would not allow me to fail. And many of those teachers, with the exception of 3, look like you in this room. They poured into me. They made sure I had experiences. I had a passport living in public housing because I got to go to Europe with Julia Farrelly. I had Mr. Al Baldwin, who made sure I had opportunities that utilized the gifts he saw me. So when I played Josephine Baker in his 20s and 30s class, society class, I forget the name of it. The next thing I know, I was getting a call when there was a producer in Chapel Hill looking for a young kid to be in a commercial. Those were people who invested in me upstream. They didn't wait to see, what I would turn out to be, or they didn't wait until they were getting a call from juvenile services saying, we got this kid in Chapel Hill who needs juvenile supports to keep them out of juvenile detention. That was an upstream investment. It was an upstream investment when I was young, and I helped integrate University Baptist. They ended up with a preschool there. I was one of the first Black kids there in the preschool, in Head Start at the time. Investment early on. I know, as challenging as my childhood was, I know that I was among one of the blessed and privileged ones. So I want to challenge all of us to think about this upstream. Think about policies. Are you making calls on behalf of the school district to get services and supports in place to the kids who are faring the worst? Are you looking at opportunities for kids to participate in soccer and in baseball and all of the other lacrosse, all of the other sports that you know can make a difference because it made a difference in your child or your grandchild or your nieces and nephews' lives? Are you making spaces for them? Are you looking at the lacrosse team or the soccer team and saying, hey, you know what? I don't see any kids from any of those neighborhoods that Michelle was talking about. I need to make a call. Does a kid need a sponsorship? That's the kind of investment upstream. And so that's my message for us. Think about the policies. Think about the opportunities that exist. Adverse childhood experiences can make or break an adult. And many of the adults that we have in our prisons, and I hope that you look up the research. A lot of it has come out of our fine institution here, UNC. I hope that you'll look up the research findings about the influence of adverse childhood experiences. So poverty is just one, child malnutrition is another one, where they live in environments filled with violence. Also, in interpersonal types of experiences, children coming from abuse, abject neglect, severe abuse, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, violence of all sorts. These children, often we will find in surveys and in studies of prisoners, they were these children who experienced adverse childhood experiences. And then also, there's another part of that kids who experience traumatic childhood experiences, that take it to a higher level. How many of you eat at Grata in Carborough? Y'all eat it? Yeah, good breakfast there. Encourage it. Recommend it, but
I've eaten there.
yes, recommend it.
I said Carborough.
Yes, in Carmel Mall, Grata, right? So the owner there, I was, he has books all around, and I was looking at the book, The Body Keeps Score, and he said, "Do you like this book?" And I said, I've heard about it. I'm definitely going to get it. He signed it. He said, "My story's in here," and he autographed it for me. So we don't know who among us, even where we are, have experienced traumatic experiences. Trauma takes it higher than just poverty, right? It's kids who lost their parents, kids who ended up living with grandparents because their parents died. When we were growing up, and I graduated high school in '86. The AIDS epidemic was like really real and like scary. So was crack cocaine, even in Chapel Hill, right? Really real and scary. So there are kids who lost parents either to the judicial system as a result of the war on drugs, or who lost parents due to HIV/AIDS. That's a traumatic experience. There are other traumas that kids experience right here in Chapel Hill, under our noses. I sit on the Compass Center's board, and we are the center that provides refuge for women and children who are fleeing domestic violence. And thank you if you've ever contributed to the Compass Center. And so I know right here in our own county, there are kids who are experiencing traumatic childhood experiences across the socioeconomic strata. So they are not just kids living in poverty. They are also kids living in communities that many of us in this room live in. So again, I want to encourage you as you're thinking about your commitments, as you're thinking about the legacy of this Rotary Club, East Chapel Hill Rotary Club. I want to encourage you to think about shifting from a downstream, that's investing in programs that already exist, that are stood up. There's a lot of people in that water. There's a lot of people in that water. And asking yourselves, what can we do to keep a child from making it downstream by providing them the resources and supports and advocacy that they deserve in place of parents and guardians who cannot. Your voices matter. Your voices are important. People stop and listen to what you have to say. Thank you all so much for this time.
Y'all we still have some time left if anyone has any questions for Michelle. And I do want to also mention, even though this looks like a stark white room, we do have a handful of African-American members in the club.
Oh, great.
They're not here today, unfortunately. But one day, and I know you work in Raleigh, I don't know if you're ever interested in coming here on a Friday with regularity, but you're just the kind of person we need for this.
What's so funny, I usually work home from Fridays, but we had a lot going on this week in our General Assembly, if you didn't know, but so I had to go and get some catch-up work. Thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yes, so it's kind of interesting you bring up this downstream, upstream. So I'm kind of navigating Medicaid for a good friend and neighbor of ours right now, older woman, but it's in seeing what she has to deal with in terms of the assets you're allowed to have, which is $2,000, and that's it. It's like a cyclical. How do you get out of it once they're in it? You can't leave it. It's. Do you have any insight into that? What we could possibly do?
So is it Medicaid or Medicare?
Medicaid.
Medicaid, yeah. So Medicare and Medicaid are interesting because you're absolutely right. I'm advocating now for my great uncle who still lives on Rogers Road. He lives on Rush Road, who is 82 and takes care of his son, who is 57 in a wheelchair and has been in a wheelchair forever, right? My aunt died, and so he's his primary care. We can't get him, the household brings in $300 too much to get Medicaid services. And so family, of course, chips in to get them the supports that they need. Again, it's a policy decision because Medicaid is a federal program. And what I recommend is we start talking to our congressional delegations and not just delegates and not just Valerie Fashee and those who represent, not just her representing the 4th Congressional District and those around us, but we start saying you need to look at the requirements for Medicaid. People started doing that with the poverty threshold, and now there's some movement around changing, poverty. You're at poverty if you have a family of 4 and you make you're at 14,000 or 18,000, some ridiculous number. Who can live? One person cannot live off $18,000 a year, right? And I always say, when I was in undergrad, I wasn't making $18,000 a year. I was making like $35,000 a year working for OPC Mental Health. And so it is a challenge. It's a federal policy, and that's an upstream approach in terms of helping to change the requirements of who qualifies. And that's what I would start. I would start looking at the criteria where, indeed, because it's not a quick fix. There's nothing I can say that you can go and do tomorrow with them and would get them. The other thing was I'm hearing, Medicare, you're having to sell all your assets down, or people have to go get skilled care and all of that. Again, that's a federal policy. Voices in this room can, I think, together can send a long message to our delegates that that's what we want them to work on. Is changing that, because in this area, some people want to stay here in Chapel Hill. They grew up here. My family, this is home. We're 3rd, 4th generation. I'm a Cotton born a Cotton, so the Cottons are here. Libby Cotton is recognized and all of that, right? My family can barely afford to still stay here in places that they bought, but still, So I say just think about the policies from Medicaid and Medicare, and they can be changed. So, yes.
Other than policy advocacy, is there a specific type of project you would like us to do to be able to help some of these people? And if we don't know them,
right. Yeah, I would. So one thing came to mind for a while ago. We need to do an inventory of where those waiting lists are for kids in programs, after school programs, so that you will know where the gaps are. And then again, I did say provide a scholarship to sponsor kids into some of these programs that can turn their lives around. And I'm not talking about the programs designed for at-risk youth. I'm talking about, lacrosse. I'm talking about summer camp, outside, Seagull, if that's still a camp, is that still a camp? I'm talking about things that were privileges that you could afford or that your child could have access to. That's the upstream. Those programs for disadvantaged youth are important. Support them, but start doing an inventory and saying, hey, have we had a black child from Chapel Hill from working class or low income family? Have they have they had access here? Have they participated in this particular program? Are they in this particular club? And if not, then start pushing and doing whatever you need to do. But it starts with doing, this is my PhD hat, the research to see where they are. And it will make a huge difference. And the other thing is, we are mentors of kids, but we also need to be mentors of families. Because once you take a kid out and you send them back in there, the mom is still struggling. And all the focus is on the children. So an upstream approach is to start looking at the mom, who oftentimes that's the case, the single heads of household, or the guardian, and saying, hey, what do you need? If I can help you, what do you need? So start doing an inventory. We need to do that kind of inventory. I know where the disadvantaged kids are and where the waiting list and so forth. And I'm not talking about those programs. Yes.
In light of the bill that's going through the legislature right now about abortion, you know, a lot of the same people that are voting for that are wanting to cut back on food aid, subsidies for housing, everything that would help the child and the mother that it's like a 13-year-old or a 15-year-old girl, didn't really know any better, didn't get support. It's not her total fault that this happened, but then everybody blames her and don't do anything about it.
That's right. What I failed to say is my mom and one of my other best friends who was Teacher of the Year, Kim Farrington, they were friends and they were pregnant at the same time. So my mom turned 16. So my mom's birthday is May 29th, mine's June 2nd. She turned 16 when I was born. Kim's mom was 16. Kim's birthday was later in the year. Even back then, we had people investing in our communities, and we had a strong community support system. We don't have that so much now. And I will respond to what you just said with a quote that someone said, it may have been Reverend Barber or someone I heard say it along the way. The same people who, you want every child, regardless whether there's birth defects, whether it's rape or incest, product or da-da-da, every child will be born, but once they're born, you don't want to help take care of them. You don't want to provide the supports necessary to take care of them. And so subsequently, some children are sentenced death by the mere nature of the adverse childhood experiences that they will experience. And then those are the ones that become the ones who don't give a darn. I only cuss on a certain day, so I had to control that. They don't give a darn. So those are the kids that will come and hold somebody hostage, take them to a teller and kill them afterwards. Story sounds familiar? They are the kids, the ones who, shocked our community, who will kill a professor walking in the neighborhood. They are the ones that will come up. And so I say we invest early on in these kids, not cross our fingers and hope they make it downstream to one of these other programs. But you're absolutely right. The same ones who want every child to be born don't want to help invest in programs to make sure they're not sentenced to death while they're living. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Yes, it's a chance for me to do a plug. I'm on the board of an upstream organization, and it's not just lacrosse and soccer.
Right.
It's also music.
Yes.
It's called Empowerment Music, and we coordinate with UNC undergraduates, Duke undergraduates, etc. And they teach music to the underprivileged kids. So they don't have a gun in their hand, they have a violin,
yes,
clarinet.
Yes.
So I'm gonna, please look it up, and we're looking for donations, but it's a wonderful opportunity.
Absolutely.
And it gives them they play in an orchestra together, and there's a sense of community, so it's called empowerment music.
I love that. I love that. And music, there's the ability to do mathematical calculations if you're reading notes and so forth, right? And so I say when you invest in the arts, music, you are investing in the science, technology, engineering, and math. And so I love that, and I'm interested in hearing more about it. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you for a great presentation. I happen to be responsible for youth services for this club. And the board knows one of the laments I have had is that the programs, while great, always seem to bestow awards and experiences on our kids who, while deserving, don't receive the same benefit as someone maybe from the population you're describing. And it's a challenge, though, for us to break out and connect with these speak. But we're working on 2 programs that are driving in that direction. Maybe you can assist us in building 1 or 2 programs, because one of our club members asked, what can we do, you know, and yes, of course, you call up, but as a club and club members, we want something specific we can sink our teeth into, and that can be replicatable across our 150 members. So it would be awesome. I think, I know the board has supported me in saying we want to build something like this.
That's great, and I would love to help. So, yes, and yes. I think that's great. Again, you know, when we invest in kids, you never know where they end up. But timing is important. And so to hear that you all are thinking about upstream approaches just makes my heart feel very good. In my presentation, there was some more examples, but I'll make sure Omar has that, of other things upstream that we need to build into youth programs to protect kids early on, but also to make sure that they matriculate down that water, into that water, with strong character, with strong supports around them, resources and so forth. And I just think you guys are, you know, you're situated to do that. You are able to.
Michelle.
Yes, DG.
We know you well as somebody spurs us on, a troublemaker kind of person. Then you've taken an establishment job. Would you tell us what you're doing and how that fits into your life plan?
Yeah. So I was on the leadership team for then DHHS Secretary Mandy Cohen, when in March 2020, Governor Cooper stood up and declared a state of emergency, that North Carolina was now in a state of emergency due to the COVID pandemic. And so from 2020 all the way through 2021, the end of 2021, we were working night and day to mitigate the effects of COVID across our state. I was called onto the COVID response leadership team to stand up along with Dr. Shannon Dowler, who came from, she's a mountain doctor, MD, to stand up the Historically Marginalized Populations Work Group, which was the work group that advised the secretary on what we needed to do to get people tested who were from historically marginalized populations, and that included Hispanic, Latino, African American, and poor rural, which include poor rural whites, as well as refugee populations. And I was exhausted like she was. So Mandy said, I'm not continuing into 2022. In November, I started thinking, you know, I think I'm ready to get off the ship again. I had been in state government before, early in my career, and got a call from a physician who said, hey, there's a headhunter that just called. I'm not interested in doing this, but the North Carolina Medical Society is looking for someone to come on their team, on their leadership team. And I thought about you, because she had been at the table. She works for Cone. She had been at the table with us advising Mandy on stuff, COVID. So I was like, Medical Society, I don't know, what do they do? I've seen the building, didn't know what they did. So interviewed, and long story short, through different things, got a call. So I am Chief Experience Officer for the North Carolina Medical Society. The two teams, the two VPs and their teams that report up to me are our comms and marketing team and our member services team. So we are the professional organization for North Carolina licensed physicians and physician's assistants. I'm also helping to guide the organization around its DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I don't know if you know the history, but so the Medical Society was founded in 1849. It is the oldest association in North Carolina. And it was founded in 1849, before the Civil War. So Black physicians could not become a member. And it wasn't until the 2000s, actually, that that we saw some change, that they saw some changes, late 1990 something and then two. And there's been this rift between the Old North State Medical Society. Old North State Medical Society is the society that the black physicians founded because the North Carolina Medical Society would not let them be a member. And this way predates me. This is like when St. Agnes Hospital was open. And so I'm working on building that bridge. And along with a good friend of mine, Dr. Viviana Martinez Bianchi, who's from Argentina, but she's a Duke physician. She and I are working to get more Latina physicians and physician assistants to be a part of the medical society. So I'm doing quite a bit there. But the policy work that's done, we message around that. So that bill, Wednesday or third Wednesday, that passed the House and then made its way to the Senate yesterday. We've been messaging around that, getting physicians to speak on it and mobilizing and all that.
Michelle, thank you so much. There are people that talk the talk, and there are people that walk the walk. Okay? Michelle gets the job done. She always has. She knows I love her and always appreciate what you do for our state and for people in general. We have a gift, Michelle, that I'd like to give to you. One of our members has a charity. They sell African art to raise money for African children's education in Zimbabwe. It's named Amina's Gift, and I know you're a Tar Heel, so.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you.
Y'all have a good weekend. Hope to see you at the cookout on Thursday.